was so busy doing the day-to-day stuff that hearing consultative BS about creating a data charter, I would say that's just a complete waste of time. I was ignorant and young. I understand now that doing certain things like this, particularly as an organization grows larger, is super valuable. When you have a team and a company and an organization, you need to do certain things to organize stuff better. That's how you are successful. If you think you can get away with being a disorganized freak, fine. Have fun, but success comes from organization, and a data charter is a great way to start. Do you have a data charter for your business, and do you know how to make one? Today, I'm going to cover what is a data charter and how to make one. This is based off the blog post I wrote about asking different questions to determine your data readiness. I had 10 questions. I ended up publishing 50 different things you could do to improve your data readiness. And so I already covered in a video part 1, which is defining the primary business questions. And number 2 is to create a data charter. So I think in order to talk about data readiness and the foundational questions and what you need to do to start cleaning your data, choosing tools before even trying to implement something like attribution or modeling or anything fancy. So you got to go a little bit deeper. And so today we're going to talk about how to create a data charter. So a data charter is probably the single most underrated, most powerful document that a company can have when it comes to your data. And a data charter can be just one page, just one. But it can change everything. It can align your strategy. It can align your language, your priorities, the ownership of the data, your definitions, your expectations, and more importantly, it can give your team clarity. So today I'm going to walk through exactly what a data charter is, why it matters, how to create one, and what goes into it. And I'll do my best to define stuff along the way. If I have to do that, I'll give it some examples. And by the end of this video, you'll hopefully know, if not exactly how to build the charter for your org, you should feel like you should understand how to get started. So let's start by asking a big question. Why do you even need a data charter? I know when I was younger, I would hear people or consultants talking about doing certain work, and I was so busy doing the day-to-day stuff that hearing consultative BS about creating a data charter, I would say that's just a complete waste of time. I was ignorant and young. I understand now that doing certain things like this, particularly as an organization grows larger, is super valuable. It's not just you have a team. And when you have a team and a company and an organization, you need to do certain things to organize stuff better. That's how you are successful. If you think you can get away with being a disorganized freak, fine. Have fun, but success comes from organization, and a data charter is a great way to start. So why do you even need a data charter? So here's the answer. Most orgs collect a ton of data, but very few teams can agree on why they're collecting it. Marketing collects one thing, product team will collect another, the finance team is tracking something completely different, sales has a different CRM and they have fields that don't match anyone else, the web analytics teams just try and all make it work somehow. Everyone's doing their best, but a lot of times a lot of people they're not rowing in the same direction. They're all rowing in different directions. So a data charter can fix that. A data charter is basically a one-page agreement, and it's going to answer a number of questions. It's going to say, why does the data exist? What decisions should it help us make by having this data? What is in the scope and what is out of scope? Who owns what aspects of this data? What definitions do we use? What level of quality do we need? How does an insight become an action? You need to answer these questions. It needs to be simple, it needs to be clear, and it needs to have alignment across your org. And I know that sounds impossible to some people. So let's define it properly. So the definition of a data charter. A data charter is a one-page strategic alignment document that defines the purpose, scope, ownership, standards, and decision-making framework for your organization's data. It's not technical. It's not a schema. It's not a list of tables. It's intent. It's the intent behind your data. And without that intent, your data eventually becomes chaotic. So part 1 of this is to start with purpose. So the first part of your data charter is a purpose statement. It's the heart of the document. You need to ask yourself, what outcomes must this data help us achieve? Most teams never really articulate this. Once you do, everything becomes clearer. So what are some examples of simple purpose statements? Our data exists to measure profitable growth. Our data exists to reduce wasted spend. Our data exists to identify which channels drive incremental value. Our data exists to help leadership make confident decisions. You want your purpose statement to be simple enough that someone who has just joined your org yesterday can understand them, understand the purpose. Then, going back to part 1 of my series, you want to layer in your 2 to 3 primary business questions. So these are the questions that your data should help you answer. So examples of these: which channels actually contribute to our customer acquisition? Which audiences respond to which messages? Where are we overspending? Where should we allocate budget next quarter? Which products have the highest LTV potential? These are not technical questions, these are business questions, right? So again, what are the primary business questions? And the moment you write them down, everyone can begin to align. So again, the business questions, if you hadn't watched the other thing, that's fine. Business question, it's a measurable, decision-oriented question that the answer can drive specific actions or changes. So you're not asking, what's our CPC on Meta? That's not a business question. You might ask, is Meta actually profitable for us? That is a business question. That's the level of questions we want. You now have your purpose statement, and you have your primary 2 to 3 primary business questions. Now we go into the next part of the data charter, and that is to define the scope. So scope matters because it prevents being overwhelmed. It prevents teams from trying to fix every part of the data at once. Your data charter should define what areas of the business the data covers. It should show what systems are included, what area it should, what's in scope this year, what's not in scope this year. Scope defines the boundaries of what your data strategy will address. It defines what the problem areas, the systems, the capabilities are included, and what is deliberately excluded. And yes, it is healthy to exclude things. People want to track everything and record everything, but maybe this year you're not tackling LTV modeling. Maybe this year you're not fixing product analytics. Maybe you're not building a customer 360. Maybe you're not touching warehouse automation. Writing, we are not doing X right now, is powerful. It protects your team's focus. It protects you from churn using different technologies and tools. It protects you from shiny object syndrome. It protects you from making the mistake of just bouncing around and letting you focus on what you need to focus on. Okay, so once we have that scope, define what's in scope, what's not in scope, the primary business questions, purpose. Now we want to talk about ownership and accountability. So without ownership, data will decay relatively quickly. Every data domain needs someone who is responsible for it. The marketing data, the product data, the CRM data, the financial data. You need someone who is responsible and even accountable for it. So you need to define who is the executive sponsor for the different parts of the data, who is the data steward for each of these domains, who are the business stakeholders, and who is the decision maker on these for each path towards insight. So executive sponsors. And the executive sponsor is ultimately the person who is accountable for the success of the data strategy. This is normally a VP, a CMO, a CFO, a CPO. They are the one who is responsible for the success of the strategy. The data steward, that's the person they're responsible for the quality, the upkeep, and the clarity of a specific domain of data. So it could be the same person. Your executive sponsor could be your data steward, but often if the org is big enough, the executive sponsor has someone that's reporting to them, and it's their job to be responsible for the quality and the upkeep and the clarity of that data. Stakeholders, those are people who they use the data regularly to make decisions. So you want to list out the stakeholders. Who are the people that actually use this? Who are the people making decisions based on this? And then you want to define decision owners. Those are the people who are acting on these insights. Who is actually going to change the campaigns? Who is actually going to adjust spend or implement a new experiment? When the ownership isn't clear, you prevent the nobody owns this, so everybody suffers problem. Okay, so now that we know who the owners are, now we want to move into the next section, which is shared language, the taxonomy, and definitions. So this is often the most overlooked part of data alignment. You need to define the key terms that you have. Otherwise, nothing can mean anything. Marketing might use conversion to mean one thing. Finance may use conversion to mean something else. Product team might not even use the word conversion. You might have different teams within marketing that say combine conversion in a different way. So that's why shared definitions matter. So inside your data charter, you need to include what are your core metrics, your naming conventions, your channel taxonomy, your ID logic, your time windows, your cohort definitions. And that might seem like a lot, especially when I said this should be a one-page document. But again, it's not a schema, and you're not writing a dictionary. You're writing the non-negotiable definitions that everyone needs to agree on. So, a full taxonomy, it's a structured naming system that ensures that events, campaigns, channels, and entities, that they're named consistently. So you not want to have your full taxonomy necessarily. You definitely don't want your full taxonomy in your data charter. You can have that in a separate document. I'll talk about taxonomy later in another video. But key terms in your taxonomy that you need to define for success, like conversion, you might want to have. I mentioned ID logic, so the rules of how users, customers, or accounts are identified and connected. Do you have some sort of internal connection ID, some kind of process for your ID logic? You need to define what that is. A cohort, you might have different cohorts, so different groups of users who share different characteristics, like the month they first purchased or some other aspect of those cohorts. And the data charter should include enough of those definitions that a new hire can read this data charter and understand what you're talking about, what you mean when you're saying conversion, what you mean when you're saying our monthly new user cohort or whatever. It should be defined so it's pretty clear what you're talking about. Again, it shouldn't be the full taxonomy. You want to put that in another document. But you want just the key things that you want that new hire to understand. These are the important things. Again, purpose, questions, scope, who's owning what do we mean when we say conversion, things like that. So next part of the data charter is the data flow and identity part. So this is high level only. This is not a technical diagram. Think of it more like a map of how the data moves, like a subway map. So you want to include what data you have, where it originates, and where it goes. What transformations happen? Where do those transformations happen? What IDs connect the systems? Who can access which parts of the system? Where that data ultimately lands for analysis. So a data flow, technically it's the sequence of movement of data from the source to storage to the destination. And then when I say things like identity resolution, that's the methods used to connect events, users, and customers, devices across systems using shared IDs. You can do that in different ways. You can have a deterministic identity, which is an exact match. You can have a probabilistic identity, which is a statistical guess. You can have a synthetic identity, which is stitched through different rules or models. You don't need to go deep. You just need enough to orient people about how you're looking at that stuff, if you are looking at it. Next section, quality standards. So quality doesn't necessarily mean perfect. Quality, it's not perfect. There is no perfect. Get that through your head. There is no such thing as perfect. But quality it's consistent, it's updated, it's reliable, it's usable. And so you want to define standards for your data. So you want to define standards like freshness. Marketing data is available within 24 hours. You want to define latency, right? So the pipeline should update by 9 a.m. every day. Validation, you want to say no null campaign names are allowed. Or you want to have monitoring aspects. There's alerts for schema changes. What are the escalation rules? What are the documentation expectations? So, if you want to define, you should define freshness. So how recently do you update your data? How long, the latency, again, like I said, how long does it take the data to appear after the real world event? You want to maybe define schema drift. What are the unexpected changes in the structure of the data, like new fields or renamed fields? You want to treat data quality like hygiene, not like it's a one-time project, right? So you want to treat your data like brushing your teeth, not what's something you do once a year, an annual physical or worse. If you treat your data like an annual physical, you're going to be messed up. You need to treat it like this is your daily hygiene. You're brushing your teeth, you're taking a shower. Hopefully you do that on a daily basis. All right. So Now you also want to talk about how insights can become action. So this is where a lot of data efforts fail. You generate insights, maybe you build dashboards, you show people reports, and then nothing changes. No one does anything on it. And the data charter should outline what is that decision loop. So it should define where do your insights land, who receives them, how fast they have to act on them, how their actions, how the actions that people ultimately take are documented. So you document the actions you take based on the data, and then how the results of those changes are reviewed, and then how those learnings get recycled. This is a decision loop. So a decision loop, it's this process by which you take an insight and you turn it into an action, and then the actions create results, and the results feed back into new insights. And that's how data drives growth. It's not dashboards, it's action loops. And so if you don't have a defined action loop, you don't have this defined process, it's very likely that you could be in a situation where you're doing a lot of work, you're pushing around a lot of data, you're putting out a lot of reports, but if no action is taken on it, that action, what action you took, is not reviewed for impact, and then that's not fed back into your cycle of insight to make new decisions, take new actions, show new results, measure those, determine what you did, put it back into insights and back into new actions. That decision loop, that is key to getting value out of your data. And so you need to define that. So after you have that defined of how you're going to get those decisions, the next part is to have a 12-month data roadmap. So again, this is a short document. So I'm mentioning a lot of things, and these are not necessarily things that you want to have this be everything defined in it. But what you want to have is not a technical project plan. You want to have a basic prioritized sequence. So you might just have 4 lines. One, what are your goals per quarter? Q1, we're going to fix the identity and naming problems. Q2, we're going to unify our spend and our results. Q3, we're going to implement cookieless MTA. Q4, we're going to build optimization loops. Whatever that 12-month plan is, you have it in there. And again, think the new person coming in, they say, here's the purpose, here's the questions we're trying to answer, here's the scope, here's the owners, here's the definitions, here's our decision process of how things actually turn from insight into action, and here's what we're building towards. Here's our actual overarching goals that we want to take to get there. And so you want it to have clarity and confidence and direction and alignment, and you want this roadmap to be this high level sequence of these priorities that show what capabilities are going to be built in what orders. It's expectation setting, right? So then you want to define, after that, you want to define what success looks like. So a data charter should end with a clear picture of success. So examples of this could be, you might say, success looks like fewer debates about our attribution. It could be faster reporting cycles. It could be measuring a increased confidence in decisions. Maybe more experiments are getting run. More signals are informing spend allocation. You have a higher efficiency in your ad spend. You have an alignment of leadership. You want people to visualize what that outcome is. What is the success if you get a year down from this data charter? So again, there's a lot. And a lot of these things could be long documents on their own. But remember, this data charter, you want to try and keep it to 1 page. If it's too long, no one's going to read it. If no one reads it, no one aligns to it. If no one aligns to it, nothing changes. A 1-pager forces clarity from you and what you're saying and to others and how they're going to take it. A 1-page forces prioritization. You got to pick, what do we want to put on here? What is important? A 1-pager forces alignment. It forces people to get on 1 page with that. So literally. And so when your data charter is done, every other data effort you're going to do becomes easier, whether you're talking about your attribution, your modeling, your experimentation, your forecasting, your optimization, just building dashboards and reporting. You're no longer going to be building on chaos. You're going to build on clarity. And so again, that's why the number 2 recommendation I had is to build a data charter. And so thanks for listening, and hopefully soon I will do episode 3, and I will keep on going with 50 different ways to improve your data readiness. I'm Saif Sharif of 3 Bears Data. Thank you.